Qiaoniang. It is said that there was a gentleman in Guangdong named Fu. When he was 60 years old, he gave birth to a son named Fu Lian. He looks very smart, but he is a born eunuch. At the age of 17, his genitals are as big as a silkworm. People near and far knew about it, so no one married their daughter to him. Duke Fu expected that his heirs would be extinct, so he was worried day and night, but there was nothing he could do. Fu Lian studied with his family teacher. One day when the teacher was out, a monkey performer came on the street. Fu Sheng went out to watch, which delayed the day's homework. He asked the teacher to come back soon. He was afraid of being punished, so he skipped school and ran away. Fu Sheng ran a few miles away from home in anger and saw a girl in white walking in front of him with a maid. As soon as the girl turned around, Fu Sheng saw that she was extremely beautiful and walking very slowly, so he took a few steps and caught up with the girl. The girl turned back to the maid and said, "Is Mr. Lang going to Changzhou?" The maid was ordered to ask Fu Sheng, and Fu Sheng asked them what they wanted. The woman said, "If you go to Changzhou, I have a letter that I would like you to take to my house. My mother is at home and can entertain you." Fu Sheng didn't have a specific destination, so he thought he could take a boat trip to the sea. So he agreed to the woman's request. The woman handed the letter to the maid, who in turn gave it to Fu Sheng. Fu Sheng asked her name and residence, and the woman replied, "My surname is Hua. I live in Kinnu village, 3 or 4 miles north of the city." Fu Sheng arrived at the seaside, got on the boat and went to Changzhou. Fu Sheng followed the route given by the woman and arrived at the northern suburbs of the city. The sun had already set. I asked about Kin village, but no one knew. After walking another 4 or 5 miles north, the sky was already filled with stars, and the moon was hanging in the sky. There was a stretch of wild grass and wild slopes in front of me. There was not a single person walking, and there were no homes. At this time, he felt scared and embarrassed. Suddenly I saw a grave by the roadside, and I thought I would sit by it for the night. He was also afraid of tigers and wolves, so he climbed into a tree next to the grave to spend the night. He squatted on a tree branch, hearing only the whistling of the wind and the whining of grasshoppers. He felt uneasy and deeply regretful for a moment. Fu Sheng was sitting on a tree when he suddenly heard someone's voice under the tree. He looked down and saw a courtyard clearly below. There was a beautiful woman sitting on a stone, and two maids were waiting on both sides with lanterns. The beauty looked left and right and said, "Tonight the moon is sparse with stars. You can make a cup of the group tea sent by Aunt Hua to enjoy the moon." Fu Sheng thought on the tree, "These must be ghosts." I was so scared that my hair stood on end and I didn't dare to breathe loudly. Suddenly a maid said, "There is someone in the tree." The woman was startled and said, "Where did you come from?" A brave boy who dared to peek at people. Fu Sheng was very frightened and had nowhere to hide, so he had to slide down from the tree and kneel on the ground, beg for mercy. When the woman came closer and took a look, she immediately turned from anger to joy. She reached out and pulled Fu Sheng up and sat down side by side. Fu Sheng glanced sideways and saw that the woman was about 16 or 17 years old, with a very beautiful appearance and figure, and her accent sounded like a local. The woman asked Fu, "Why are you here?" Fu Sheng said, "To deliver a message to someone." The woman added, "There are often robbers in the wild, and it is not safe to sleep here. If you don't mind the simplicity of my home, just live there for a few days." Then he invited Fu Sheng into the house. There was only one bed in the room, and the woman ordered the maid to lay 2 quilts on it. Fu Sheng was ashamed of himself and wanted to sleep on the ground. The woman smiled and said, "We are here as distinguished guests. How can my daughter Yuan Long dare to lie on a bed alone?" Fu Sheng had no choice but to sleep on the bed with her. "But I was so panicked that I didn't dare to move." Not long after, Fu Shengju felt that the woman reached out to touch him and gently squeezed his thigh. Fu Sheng pretended to be asleep and didn't seem to feel anything. After a while, the woman got into Fu Sheng's quilt and shook him with her hands. Fu Sheng remained motionless. The woman then reached out to touch Fu Sheng's vagina. As soon as she touched it, her hand stopped immediately. She was so disappointed that she quietly crawled out of Fu Sheng's quilt and started to cry secretly. At this time, Fu Sheng was scared and ashamed. He was really ashamed and resented God for making him defective. The woman got up and ordered her maid to light the lamp. When the maid saw the tears on her master's face, she was surprised and asked what was wrong. The woman shook her head and said, "I'm sorry for my fate." The maid stood beside the bed, only looking at her master's face, waiting for her master's instructions. The woman said, "Wake up Mr. Lang and let him go." Fu Sheng felt even more ashamed after hearing this, and worried that he would have nowhere to go in the middle of the night. While he was thinking, a woman opened the door and entered the house. The maid said, "And Tuo is here." Fu Sheng took a peek and saw that this woman was over 50 years old and very elegant. When the woman saw that the woman was not sleeping, she asked why, but the woman did not answer. She saw another person lying on the bed and asked, "Who is that person sharing the bed with?" The maid answered for the woman, "A young man came to stay here at night." The woman smiled and said, "I wonder if it's Qiaoniang's night of flowers and candles." He looked up and saw that the woman's tears were still wet and asked in surprise, "On your wedding night? You shouldn't cry. Could it be that the groom is rough?" The woman still didn't answer and became even more sad. The woman lifted the quilt to see what was going on. Unexpectedly, when she lifted the quilt, she found a letter falling to the ground. She picked it up and looked at it and said in surprise, "This is my daughter's handwriting." I opened the letter immediately and was very surprised. The woman asked the woman, and she said, "This is the third sister's family letter." The letter said that Wu Lang was dead, and the third sister was helpless and her life was difficult. The woman said, "This young man once said that he would deliver a message for someone, but fortunately he was not sent away." The woman called Fu Sheng and asked him where the letter came from. Fu Sheng told the story again. The woman said, "How can I repay you for sending a message so far away?" Then she looked at Fu Sheng and said with a smile, "Why did you offend Qiaoniang?" Fu Sheng was timid and said, "I don't know what the crime is." The woman asked Qiaoniang again, and Qiaoniang sighed and said, "It's a pity that I married an eunuch when I was alive, but I met another eunuch after I died, so I am sad." The woman looked at Fu Sheng again and said, "Is such a smart and beautiful child actually a eunuch? This is my guest. You cannot disturb others for a long time." So he led Fu Sheng to the east wing, reached out to check Fu Sheng's vagina, and said with a smile, "No wonder Qiaoniang is crying. Fortunately, there is still a root cause, and there is a way to cure it." Then he lit the lamp, rummaged through the cabinets, and found a pill. He asked Fu Sheng to take the black pill, whispered to him not to move, and then closed the door and went out. Fu Sheng was lying alone in the room, wondering what disease this medicine could cure. When it was almost 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and felt a hot air coming from my navel, as if there was something hanging down my buttocks. With a touch of his hand, he has become a real man. He was surprised and happy in his heart, as happy as if he had been made a duke all of a sudden. The next morning, as soon as the window lattice could be seen clearly on the window, the woman entered the house, brought some sesame seed cakes for Fu Sheng to eat, and told him to sit patiently. She locked the door, came out and said to Qiaoniang, "Fu Lang has done a good job in delivering the letter, so I have to ask Qiaoniang to come and become his god sister. Let's hide him for a few days to prevent everyone from hating him." After that, he went out. Fu Sheng was locked in the room, walking around, feeling bored, and looking out from the crack in the door from time to time, like a bird in a cage. Seeing Qiaoniang in the yard, I wanted to ask her to come over and tell her about my changes, but I felt too embarrassed to speak. It was not until evening that the woman came back with her daughter. The woman opened the door and said, "Are you boring Mr. Fu? Qiaoniang, please come and thank Mr. Fu." Qiaoniang came over hesitantly and saluted Fu Sheng. The woman called Fu Sheng and Qiaoniang called each other brother and sister. Qiaoniang smiled and said, "You can also call me sister." After that, we put down the wine and sat down to drink together. After drinking a few drinks, Qiaoniang teased Fu Sheng and said, "Eunuch, are you also attracted by beautiful women?" Fu Sheng said, "A lame man can't forget to wear shoes, and a blind man can't forget to see." Everyone laughed together. Because Qiaoniang had been working hard all the way, Qiaoniang ordered someone to arrange another house for Qiaoniang to rest. The woman looked at Qiaoniang and said, "Let the brother and sister sleep in the same room." Qiaoniang was shy and embarrassed. The woman then said, "This person looks like a man, but is actually a girl. What are you afraid of?" And urged them to go to bed early, secretly telling Fu Sheng, "You can be regarded as my godson, but in fact you are my son-in-law." Fu Sheng was very happy and took Qiaoniang to bed. This night he came into contact with a woman for the first time, and he was extremely happy. Then he asked Qiaoniang on the pillow, "Who is Qiaoniang?" Qiaoniang replied, "She is a ghost. She is unparalleled in talent and beauty, but she had a bad fate. She found a husband named Mao, and because of castration disease, she died. You can't have sex at the age of 18. So Qiaoniang was depressed and even died." Fu Sheng was afraid that Qiaoniang was also a ghost, so Qiaoniang said, "To tell you the truth, I'm not a ghost, but a fox. Because Qiaoniang lives here alone with no one to accompany her, and my mother and I have no home, we live here." Fu Sheng was greatly frightened. Qiaoniang said again, "You don't have to be afraid. Although we are ghost foxes, we don't harm anyone." From then on, Fu Sheng and Qiaoniang lived together every day. Although he knew Qiaoniang was a ghost, he loved her huanjuan beauty in his heart and hated not having the chance to show his changes. Fu Sheng is elegant, gentle, and very witty. He is easy to talk and laugh, and Qiaoniang likes him very much. One day, Hu's mother and daughter were going to visit relatives elsewhere, and before leaving, they locked Fu Sheng in the room. He felt so bored that he walked around the room and called Qiaoniang through the window. Qiaoniang ordered her maid to take the key and tried to open the lock. After trying all the keys, she happened to open the lock. Fu Shengfu told Qiaoniang that he wanted to be alone together, so Qiaoniang sent the maid away. Fu Sheng took Qiaoniang to bed and hugged her. Qiaoniang put her hand under Fu Sheng's navel and said jokingly, "It's a pity that Qi has given birth to something less here." Before he finished his work, he actually grabbed a handful. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Why was this thing so big last time when it was small?" Fu Sheng said with a smile, "I was shy last time, so I met you." He shrank back. This time he was embarrassed by being slandered, so he swelled up like an angry frog. After the two were happy, Qiaoniang said angrily, "Today I know the reason why Hua Gu locked you up all day. The mother and daughter were wandering around with no place to live, so I lent them a house to live in. Qiaoniang learned embroidery from me. I taught her without reservation, but who knew they were so jealous?" Fu Sheng comforted and persuaded Qiaoniang, but Qiaoniang still felt resentful. Fu Sheng said, "You must not tell this matter, and Hua told me not to let others know." Before she finished speaking, Aunt Hua pushed the door open and walked in. The two of them hurriedly got dressed and got up. Hua Gu's eyes widened with anger and asked, "Who opened the door?" Qiaoniang smiled and said frankly that she opened the door. Hua Gu kept nagging angrily, and Qiaoniang retorted, "Grandma is too ridiculous. Isn't he obviously a man but actually a woman? What can he do?" Qiaoniang felt uneasy when she saw her mother talking back to Qiaoniang. Mediate from it, and then everyone turns their anger into joy. Although Qiaoniang's words were fierce, she still treated Qiaoniang condescendingly afterwards. But Hua Gu was on guard day and night. Qiaoniang and Fu Sheng were not allowed to get close to each other. They were just flirting with each other. One day, Aunt Hua said to Fu Sheng, "Both my daughter and sister Qiaoniang have served you. There is no way to continue like this. You should go home and tell your parents to get engaged early." Then he packed his luggage and urged Fu Sheng to go on the road. The two girls saw each other off reluctantly, and Qiaoniang was even more sad. She exchanged tears, like broken beads rolling down, and she couldn't stop crying. Aunt Hua stopped them and pulled Fu Sheng out of the door. Fu Sheng looked back and saw that all the houses were gone, only a large and desolate tomb. Aunt Hua sent him on the boat and said, "After you leave, I will take my two daughters to rent a house in your county. If we don't forget the old friendship, we will wait for you to welcome you in the Li family's abandoned garden." Fu Sheng went home. After Fu Sheng skipped school and ran away, the Fu family searched everywhere, and his parents were extremely anxious. Suddenly, The whole family was very happy to see Fu Sheng come back. Fu Sheng briefly talked about his experience and proposed the engagement with Fahrenheit. His father said, "How can you believe what the goblin said? You can come back alive because you have a physical defect. Otherwise you would have died outside," Fu Sheng said. Although they are not human beings, their emotions are the same as human beings. They are also very beautiful. If you are smart, you won't be a joke to your relatives and friends if you get married. My father didn't say anything. He just laughed. From then on, Fu Sheng often had sexual attacks and was restless. He often had private relations with the maid, and even had sex during the day, deliberately trying to let his parents know. One day a little maid saw him and reported it to the old lady. The lady didn't believe it, so she went to see it secretly. Feeling very strange, he called the maids who were friends with his son to ask, and they all confessed. The madam liked her very much and told everyone that her son had recovered from the illness, and she wanted to marry her son to a wealthy family. After Fu Sheng found out, he told his mother privately, "I will not marry anyone who is not a Chinese sister." His mother said, "There is no shortage of beauties in the world. Why do you have to marry a ghost?" Fu Sheng said, "If your son is not Huagu, he cannot cure the disease. It is unlucky to abandon others." His father agreed and sent a manservant and a maid to inquire. The family went 4 or 5 miles east of the city and found Li's abandoned garden. Sure enough, they saw wisps of smoke among the bamboo trees and the remaining walls. The maid entered the room and saw the Hua family wiping tables and chairs, as if preparing to welcome guests. The maid told her master what she wanted. When she saw Qiaoniang, she exclaimed, "Is this my little housewife? I like it when I see her. No wonder my young master is in a state of ecstasy all day long." When she asked her where her sister was, Huagu sighed. He said, "She was my adopted daughter, and she passed away suddenly 3 days ago." Immediately, wine and food were prepared to entertain the guests. The Fu family members came back and told their master the situation in detail, as well as Qiaoniang's appearance and demeanor. The Fu family was very happy. Later, he said that Qiaoniang was dead. Fu Sheng was so sad that he wanted to cry. On the day of welcoming the bride, Fu Sheng asked Aunt Hua personally, and Aunt Hua said, "Qiaoniang has been reborn as a human in the north." Fu Sheng listened and cried for a long time. Although Fu Sheng married Qiaoniang, he still did not forget Qiaoniang. Everyone from Qiangzhou was invited to inquire about her. Someone said, "There are cries at night in Kinnu's grave." Fu Sheng felt strange and told Qiaoniang. Qiaoniang pondered for a long time and cried, "I have failed Sister Qiao." Fu Sheng asked again and again. And Qiaoniang finally said, "I didn't tell Qiaoniang when my mother and I came here. Is it Sister Qiaoniang who is crying in sorrow now? I always wanted to tell you, but I was afraid of my mother's scolding." After hearing this, Fu Sheng was sad at first and then turned to joy. He immediately ordered someone to prepare a car and travel day and night to find Qiaoniang. When he arrived at the tomb, he entered the tomb and knocked on Qiaoniang's coffin, saying, "Qiaoniang, Qiaoniang, I'm here." Suddenly, Qiaoniang came out of the tomb with her child in her arms. When I saw Fu Sheng, I felt sad and miserable, complaining endlessly. Fu Sheng also started crying and asked who the child was. Qiaoniang said, "It's your little naughty child. It's been 3 months since I gave birth." Fu Sheng sighed and said, "I mistakenly listened to Huagu's words and buried your mother and son in the ground, suffering and worrying. My sin cannot be dismissed." Then we took a car and a boat back home together. Fu Sheng and Qiaoniang met the parents with the child in their arms. When the parents saw the child, they found that the child was healthy and didn't look like a ghost at all. They felt very fond of it. The two sisters get along harmoniously and respect their parents-in-law. Later, Fu's father fell ill and asked a doctor to treat him. Qiaoniang said, "The disease can no longer be cured and the soul has left the body." Supervised the preparations for the funeral, and Fu's father passed away after preparations were made. When Fu Sheng's son grew up, he looked very much like Fu Sheng, and was even smarter. He became a scholar at the age of 14. Sichuan Goheng had heard about this incident in Guangdong, but he had forgotten the detailed place name, and he did not know what the outcome would be in the future.
Alright, This story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.